Sawyer Robertson needs a bounce back week, or Baylor's going to be 0-1 in the Big 12.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by Game Time, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stuart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on YouTube. Appreciate you guys making it your first listen today and every day. We are still picking up some of the pieces from a 35-point win on Saturday. We'll hear from Dave Aranda about how he saw a little bit of the old Sawyer Robertson, not maybe in the good way, on Saturday, and how Sawyer can improve and why he needs to improve for Baylor to be 1-0 in the Big 12. And is there still a little bit of Jeff Grimes on this team? Is there a little bit too much Jeff Grimes on this team? Very interesting answer from Dave Aranda about why they can't run the football. And is Walker White not here? Is Walker White not the next guy? Let's parse through that. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. But we start where we start. Sawyer Robertson was, he was on Saturday. The performance he put out statistically is one that, again, we would have been very fortunate to have in the last year of Blake Shapen, one that you would have been very fortunate to have in the last year of Charlie Brewer. And passing-wise, even in the year of Gary Bohannon, who was good, he was fine, he was solid, championship quarterback. But for Sawyer Robertson and what he's done the last 12 months, you'd think you'd get a little bit more than 23 for 37 for 211, 3 touchdowns, and 2 picks. First 2 picks of the season against the 0-3 FCS team. I think it's fair to expect more than that. You know, is it fair to say, oh, well, this kid stinks, we'll never go anywhere? Like, no, that's not fair. And again, he was solid. He wasn't bad, but by Sawyer Robertson's standard against a team that is the standard that Samford is, you'd expect a little bit more. And you're starting to see it this week, man. Like all the top 10, here's the guys in for the Heisman Trophy, the top 5s, the top 10s. They all had Sawyer Robertson last week, and he has one okay game, and he's completely wiped off the list. This is why he needs to go nuclear, and Baylor needs to win 10 games for him to be the Heisman Trophy winner, or even in consideration for that. But either way, any way you slice it, this offense did not look all that crisp for one that scored 42 points. Only 7 points in the second half. They 3-and-outed 3 times. They punted 4 times. They punted more against Samford than they did against SMU and Auburn combined. That's too many punts, man. That's far too many punts. And my good friend Matt Mosley asked on Saturday after the game, asked Dave about it, like, hey, what did you see from Sawyer? And Dave had a really interesting answer.
The pressure of just stuff not working. I think he was feeling kind of the fog of not everyone focused in and not everybody given the type of effort that's demanded. And I think he's trying to make plays. He's trying to make something out of nothing at times. I think there wasn't a bunch of separation with releases. I think there wasn't, great pockets with protection. And some of the Sawyer that we saw today was maybe the Sawyer from 2 years ago or further back. And so we've got to get the Sawyer that we got now. We got to get him back to his self as whether it's last year or the beginning of this year. That was not what was happening today.
The old Sawyer, the 2 years ago Sawyer. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm just way off base here. But when I hear that from Dave Aranda, that sounds like, Sawyer's teammates let him down today. Like that's kind of what he was saying there, right? Like he's caught up in trying to do too much because there's not enough effort around him. Because there's not effort, there's not focus. That to me sounds like, hey, he tried to do way too much because his teammates weren't playing for him. They weren't giving the standard effort that is required for him to have a good game, for Baylor to have a good game against a real team. That's what it sounds like to me. And that's concerning because, again, it all comes back to, what we said about Dave in yesterday's show and what Dave was saying about himself, is having trouble getting these guys motivated. We've heard this for years and years and years. And this team, I maybe naively thought would be different because I think they have great leaders on this team and guys who can really play and set an example. But when you get that against Samford, it is worrisome. That is worrisome. And look, we've picked apart a 35-point win. We'll continue to do it through the end of this episode to hit the talking points. But there's usually not a lot of bad that comes from that. Like, that's usually just a wake-up call, right? Hey, guys, that was good enough today, but it will not be good enough tomorrow. And that's why your head coach goes to the podium and says that's not good enough. Standard was not kept today. We need to be much better than that. We don't have any focus. That's why you do that as a wake-up call. Where it could be bad, where it could be totally wrong, is this: if you've set Sawyer Robertson back here, if he's pressing and trying to do too much because he doesn't have the buy-in around him for a game, then who's to say he's not thinking that next week? In the first drive when guys aren't getting separation and he's thinking, I got to do this myself again. I got to thread the needle here. I got to get outside the pocket. All the things he was doing in 2023, which what Dave Aranda was talking about, when he's doing it in 2023, he doesn't have a lot of talent around him, right? That was a 3-9 team. And I'm not just going to go down the laundry list of names, but it's a major upgrade basically at every position group, especially on the offensive side of the ball from where they were in 2023. Like, it's a major, major upgrade, and something that I think was apparent in the winning streak last year and very apparent through the first 2 games of this season that I said on the show a few times is that clearly there's a lot of trust coming from Jake Spavital to Sawyer Robertson. And maybe more importantly, there's a ton of trust between Sawyer Robertson and his pass catchers, right? Whether it be running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, there's a ton of trust there. It's all option routes. These guys are getting open. He's hitting them in stride. There's a genuine connection there and a genuine trust there. On any down, he can go to any player. That's not always the case in college football. It's definitely not the case in the NFL. It's not the case in high school, which he's played before, not played in the NFL yet. Any level of football you see, that's not that common a thing where you can go to any receiver, any pass catcher on your depth chart at any down and distance. But that's what Sawyer Robertson has. And if he doesn't have a buy-in around him, then he's going to force balls next week. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but Arizona State, their defense is better than Samford's. I'm just going out on a limb. What do I know? I think they're a little bit better than Samford's, the defending Big 12 champs, the college football playoff participants, representatives of the Big 12 from last year. So that was an interesting quote. It really was. I don't think I'm putting words in mouths here. That sounded like because he didn't have the focus and the energy around him that he was trying to do too much. And that to me sounds like the guys around him need to step up there. And whether they do or not, according to Dave Aranda at his press conference yesterday, Sawyer's still working.
He's out there with Trig right now getting extra work. And so I think he's very motivated. I think you always, as a coach, you feel like you need to say something. You really don't need to say much to him. He gets it and he's on it.
What else would you expect? Sawyer Robertson getting the extra work in and doing it with a leader on this team, a sudden leader on this team in Michael Trigg, who's trying to get back. He's trying to get to 100% health and trying to make a real impact on this team. From the things that we heard about Michael Trigg before he got here, and certainly the early suspension when he was here, I didn't think we'd be in a spot like this. So I know Dave has talked about it before this season, during this season, the early parts of this season, that he's really proud of Michael Trigg and some of the other transfer guys that have become leaders on this team. So that's a good sign. But as decent as that stat line was on Saturday for Sawyer Robertson, is that going to be good enough to beat Arizona State on Saturday? Let me know in the comment section below. And then be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Because when we come back, we're going to talk about our old pal, Jeff Grimes, why Jeff Grimes' influence is still all over this football team, and why for this team and this coach, that's not a good thing. That's coming up next on Locked On Baylor. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. The daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. And you guys know how right I am. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you could turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. I love checking the projections on an NFL Sunday. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, more every time, and it works. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDON, COLLEGE, all one word, for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. One thing that Baylor, I think, was undersold on last year, or was underappreciated in, was their run game, because the pass game was fantastic. Sawyer Robertson comes onto the scene, and the dude can sling it. Not just the words of me, but the words of Danny Cannell, the words of Keaton Thomas, the words of anybody who's watching Baylor football in the last 10 months or so. Okay? Dude could sling it. But what also developed at the same time was Baylor's offensive line and Baylor's run game and the emergence of Bryson Washington. We forget that, and this is kind of funny, that when Sawyer had the breakout game against Tech, he had 5 touchdowns. Bryson Washington had 3 touchdowns in that game as well, which is, I say, easy to forget because it's funny that Baylor just scored that many times. That many times on the road in the Big 12. I think one of Bryson's was a touchdown catch, so there's an overlap there. But they just destroyed them that they scored. They did score 8 touchdowns, but I think 7 of them made up those. And DeQuan Finn had one. So anyway, I won't laugh at that anymore. Tech's a pretty good team. I wish we had that matchup this year. But the other thing about the frustration so far, it's been the defense. And for me, it's been the running game. Dave talked about it after this game and again on Monday that they're not winning the line of scrimmage. They're just not on either side of the ball. And they're really not establishing the run. You know, I said in the preview of the Samford game, would like to see Caden Knighton and Bryson Washington go for 75 plus and have those guys make up 150. You'll get some other backs in there. You'll get to 200 and whatever, like hopefully more. And you'll have kind of your token day where a lot of guys touch the ball and they can't stop you on offense. They did rush for 223 yards as a team, and they did get to 150 between those two guys. But Caden Knighton ran it 10 times for 34 yards, and Bryson Washington ran it 21 times for 135 yards. Cam, that's a good stat line. What are you talking about? They can't run the ball. Before that, they were 3.3 yards a carry. Against FBS teams this year, they're 3.3 yards a carry. And again, maybe this is nitpicking. This is not against the player at all. Bryson Washington shouldn't be carrying the ball 21 times for 135 yards against Samford. He shouldn't be taking 20 hits against Samford. That's not efficient. That's not what you want. I'd like 4 guys to get 9 carries each. I think that'd be great. And they ran 4 guys, excuse me. Dodd's got a couple of touches in there. I think he got 3 carries. So you ran 4 guys out there anyway. Why not split that up? And I think it's because they don't have confidence in the run game. And how could you after the first 2 games? They didn't establish the run at all against Auburn. They abandoned it pretty quickly, and they abandoned it pretty early in the ball game against SMU, although they used it effectively towards the end of the game in an overtime when the game got close again. But Baylor needs to be able to run the ball when they're up, when they're down, when it's 0-0. They need to be able to run the football, and they've not been able to do that this year. Not been able to be effective in that this year. And Dave was asked about it. And actually, I'm going to give you the answer he had on Saturday. about their run game after they rushed for 223 yards.
But just disappointed with line of scrimmage. This was a game going into it where offensively we wanted to say, hey, we got the run game going. We're out physicaling people. We're finishing people. We're falling forward, and I can't say that we did that.
That was a big part of what I called the most scathing press conference Dave Aranda's had in his time at Baylor. Because, of course, that's what you should be doing. You're facing an 0-2 FCS team. You should be leaning on them. You should only be passing on third down. You should be running the ball right down their throat. And he says, we couldn't do that. If you can't do that against 0-2, now 0-3 FCS Samford, how are you going to do that against the Big 12 champs? You might not be able to do it against Samford, which means you might be able to against Oklahoma State. I wouldn't rule that out at all. I think Samford's probably a better team. But you can't do that against Arizona State, Kansas State. Well, maybe them. TCU, can't do it against them. Can't do it against Utah. Can't do it against Cincinnati, who might have a new coach by that point. You can't do that in the Big 12. You can't do it against FCS. And so Dave revisited that in his press conference yesterday and gave one heck of a football guy answer. Tune in for the next minute for this.
We've had more success with stretch plays and wide zone than we have with inside zone. At the end of last year, the inside zone was by far kind of our best style of run. We just haven't been able to get the movement up front, and I think some of it has been, at the end of the game, we're running into loaded boxes, runs that have RPOs attached to them. We really should be throwing it, and we weren't. And, I think B. Wash was, there's 20 guys in there, and he's, running through 18 of them. And so I think there's a whole improvement there that's got to take place for sure. But I think the ability to run them wide with the stretch play and get that loose to kind of soften up the middle with the inside zone is how we're looking at it.
And they were so good at that at the end of last year. They were so damn effective at that. And they're not. How about this for irony? Not coincidence, which it most of the time is. I think this is irony. 2 years ago, they were 3-9. They couldn't score. They couldn't really defend well either. They had a lot of trouble running the ball. And everyone and their dog was saying, this is too archaic an offense. Get Jeff Grimes out of here. And that's what happened. Dave fired him and he went on to Kansas. Now he's at Wisconsin after a bit of a falling out with Jalen Daniels there. And 2 years later, when Baylor's actually pretty good, what does Dave say? Well, actually, we're good at running the outside zone, the wide zone. We're not good at the inside, right? We're not good at that part yet, which is just wild to me. For as much improvement as we've seen in this Baylor offense in the last 2 seasons, for Dave Aranda to say, yeah, you know what? We're good at the old thing. We're not good at this thing. 20 guys in the box and Bryson's running through 18 of them. That's really wild, man. That's really wild. And you guys probably remember this. I was not one of those like Jeff Grimes is the only problem kind of guys. There was a lot of those in the Baylor fan base. I actually think Jeff Grimes is a good, effective offensive coordinator, but I don't think they were recruiting much to that style of play, to that skill set. And clearly, it's working with a different style and a different skill set. So that's clearly that they made the right choice there. They got better offensively with Jake Spavital, who I still think is a top 10 offensive coordinator in the nation. But Baylor's got to figure this out. They've got to figure this out. Because, we were talking before week 1 about playing an SEC team and hoping and praying, winging a prayer that they would have enough physicality to compete with an SEC team. They didn't. And that's, I don't want to say fine, but that happens for the Big 12 and the ACC teams. But what can't happen is you can't not be physical enough for the Big 12 teams, which is where they're at right now. They're not physical on either line, and they don't run the football effectively, and that's where it shows the most, that they're not physical and that they're not organized. So as badly as this defense needs to get buttoned up, and as good as Sawyer Robertson is, If they don't get some semblance of the run game back, this could get ugly. And it won't probably the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But after that, it very well could. And as good as Baylor looked the back half of last season, remember, they didn't have a running game at all the first half of the season, much like they have right now. And they only finished like 7th, I think, in rushing yards in the Big 12. 7th. And that was fine. Like if they were 5th, they might win the whole conference. They're at 178 yards a game last year. They're about 30 yards less a game right now. They're not quite Kansas State and Colorado bad when it comes to that in this conference, but 83rd in the country is not going to cut it for a passing game that's this good and a defense that could really use some help, could really use some long drives on the other side. And then when Sawyer Robertson does come out of this game, whenever it is, for good, for bad, or for otherwise, is Walker White not going to come in? That's what happened on Saturday, and that might be the case going forward. What does that mean for Baylor's future? That's next on Locked On Baylor. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time, the only place I go to buy tickets for games, concerts, whatever needs a ticket. College football, here, full swing, baby. We couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in McLean Stadium, nothing like it, man. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. The queues, the hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. It's got to stop. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay, okay? The app makes it super simple. I go in, I look for my favorite team, and in just a couple of taps, I got the amazing deals. I'm talking about seeing your Baylor Bears for as low as $25. And look, we need the fans there this weekend to take on Arizona State. We need that place to be an atmosphere. Game Time is your chance to make an impact on the game. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, Locked On College, for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Maybe the most surprising part about Baylor's somewhat lackluster 35-point win over Samford was the fact that when Sawyer Robertson was subbed out, it was actually Nate Bennett that went in at quarterback. I said it on Friday's show. I would love to see some Walker White. You know, we already have a stud quarterback, so I don't think there was a lot put into the Walker White news because you knew you were getting Sawyer Robertson back. But this is a kid who's a 4-star, top 3 dual threat quarterback in America out of high school, and probably a top 20 recruit that Baylor's ever had in the recruiting rankings era, coming in from the portal from Auburn. There's a lot of upside with this kid. There's a lot to be excited about with him. And so when Sawyer Robertson goes out, Nate Bennett comes in. No disrespect to Nate Bennett, man. Friend of the show, seems like a great guy, certainly has some talent for sure. But wouldn't you expect the former high 4-star recruit, the pretty good recruit out of the transfer portal, the one that other SEC teams were looking for, wouldn't you expect him to be the guy that's coming up? Well, Dave Aranda after the game said, what we were trying to do, the plan was to go with the guys with the longest time in the program. Really? Is that what we do? So, like, if Sawyer Robertson gets hurt, God forbid, knock on wood, if Sawyer Robertson gets hurt in the second quarter against Arizona State, and there's, 42 minutes left in the game, you're bringing in Nate Bennett. You're going to roll with Nate Bennett against the defending Big 12 champs, not Walker White. And some might be saying, well, no, Cam, he was only saying it about it for that game. That was their game plan for that game. Okay, so then let's play the scenario out again. There's 42 minutes left in the game. Sawyer Robertson's hurt. He can't go back in. And now Walker White's gone in with no game action because you decided last week you wanted to go with the guys who was in the program a few more months. Nate Bennett was in the program for 4 more months than Walker White, 5. And that's what you wanted to do. That's the way you kind of wanted to handle it. I'm very surprised by it, mainly because not just this hypothetical scenario I've put out there for you, but a much more realistic hypothetical scenario that next year Sawyer Robertson's not going to be your quarterback because he's out of eligibility. And that's why you brought in a young stud 4-star in Walker White to come in so that he can be the quarterback next year. The guy that Hugh Freeze loved, this offensive genius, Hugh Freeze. Is he not going to be your quarterback next year? That's not a huge vote of confidence right now to say, oh, no, we'll actually put Nate Bennett in over you. That's weird, man. That's weird. And I'm sorry, it is. I know it's 3rd game of the season, but that's an odd thing when you go out in the portal and you get a quarterback of that ilk. Like that's interesting way to handle it in the year 2025, and the way that college football is, even before the portal, even before NIL. I think that would have been a very interesting way of handling it. If Lloyd Carr had done that at Michigan, Tom Brady might have won the Heisman, but he didn't. So is Walker White going to be the future of this program? Because I think he has the ability to. And certainly he hasn't appeared in a lot of meaningful college football snaps, right? Neither is Nate Bennett, neither is Edward Griffin. Man, if they had scored 80, Edward Griffin might have been in the game. But it felt like for the first time in a long time, Baylor had a succession plan at quarterback, right? Sawyer Robertson to Walker White, and then one of the next 2 studs who are very young, right? Nate Bennett or Edward Griffin, whichever one of them would still be in the program after that, because it is 2025 in college football. So to me, that was the weirdest part of this game, was not seeing Walker White go in there. And the reason why doesn't hold a lot of weight for me, because he's been in the program a little longer. I mean, the game's also out of reach. So why don't you get a look at the guy who's going to be your next guy? Or is this a sign that Walker White is not the next guy? That they're going to give more of a look to Nate Bennett or maybe even Edward Griffin, the freshman, over Walker White, your prize transfer quarterback recruit. Because then I think you'd have a real risk of losing him like Auburn did, Very, very weird, and something to keep an eye on, because I just would have thought that Walker would be the next guy, not just next year, but like in this year, and would be ready to go if ever anything happened to our king, Sawyer Robertson. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Then be sure to like and subscribe. But then we're going to get to trivia here before we get you out of here. We got a little Locked On Baylor trivia. You'll remember the last question I asked, the little Notre Dame theme, was who was the last team to be ranked in the AP poll after starting 0-2, like Notre Dame did just this week? Scotty B, the Baylor King, puts the crown on again. He got it right. First one in the comment section. He got it. He was right on. The year is 1988. And it was Sidney Wicker's Michigan Wolverines that did it. And I threw in the added bonus for a little coincidence sake. And that was who actually won the national championship that year. And Scotty also got that right. That would be the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the last one they won. Let's get into today's trivia. Again, first one to get it down in the comments section is going to get the shout out for next episode, or you can tweet at us at Locked On Baylor as well. This is Arizona State themed. Kenny Dillingham coming into Waco this week. Let's see if he has another casino comment for the heart of Texas. Kenny Dillingham was an offensive coordinator at what SEC program for just 1 year and led them to their best ever recruiting class, according to 247. Important caveat, according to 247. Kenny Dillingham, OC at what SEC program for 1 year, led them to their best ever recruiting class, according to 247. He was also the freshman quarterback coach of a star in the NFL right now. That's the hint I'll give to you. Let me know in the comment section below, or tweet at us at Locked On Baylor. First one to get it gets a shout out next episode. be sure to comment on this whole Walker White situation and what you think about Sawyer Robertson stepping up, how this offense can improve after what looked like a pretty good first 2 weeks. Let me know in the comments section below. Then be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, the only place on YouTube that's bringing you nothing but Baylor content for free every single weekday that's not affiliated directly with the university. We're very proud of that. So you can catch us here every weekday, 5 days a week, completely free. And we will see you on the next one. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. The next version of your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.